They called themselves gods, rulers of the galaxy for 3,000 years. But when they destroyed a human ship, they made one fatal mistake: they underestimated humanity. This is the story of how one warship, a single act of defiance, and the truth shattered an empire and changed the galaxy forever. The warship Horizon's Fury glided through the vast emptiness of space, its sleek, metallic hull reflecting the cold light of distant stars. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with tension, as if the very air carried the weight of what was to come. Captain Elias Kane stood at the center of the bridge, his face a mask of grim determination, though his clenched jaw betrayed the storm brewing beneath. In his hands, he held a data pad, its screen glowing faintly in the dim light. The message displayed on it was brief but chilling, each word etched into his memory like a scar. Unknown vessels attacking. No response. Please help, The final plea from the Celestial Dawn, humanity's proud exploration vessel, played over and over in his mind. He could almost hear the panic in their voices, see the desperation in their eyes as they faced the unknown. But there were no survivors to confirm his fears. The ship, along with its crew of scientists and explorers, had vanished into the void, leaving only this fragmented distress signal as a testament to their fate. Around him, the bridge of the Horizon's Fury was alive with muted activity. Officers moved between consoles, their voices low, their movements precise. Yet, despite the hum of machinery and the quiet exchanges, a heavy silence seemed to press down on everyone, like the calm before a storm. The crew knew what this mission meant. Humanity had reached out into the stars, hoping to find allies, knowledge, perhaps even peace. Instead, they had found death. Commander Elena Vega, the ship's tactical officer, broke the silence. Her voice, sharp and steady, cut through the oppressive atmosphere. Captain, we're approaching the Lyris 7-star system. Scanners are picking up multiple unidentified vessels near the coordinates of the Celestial Dawn's last known location. Elias turned to face her, his dark eyes narrowing. How many? He asked, his voice low but firm. Vega's fingers danced across her console, her brow furrowed as she analyzed the data. At least 5, no, 6 ships. Their signatures don't match anything in our database. They're massive, sir. Larger than anything we've encountered before. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Humanity had always speculated about the possibility of alien life, but now, faced with the reality of it, the unknown loomed like a shadow over their fragile hopes. Elias felt a chill run down his spine, not from fear, but from the weight of responsibility. Whatever was out there, it had already destroyed one of their ships. He would not let it happen again. Maintain current course, Elias ordered, his voice steady despite the tension crackling in the air. Bring us within visual range, but keep shields at maximum and weapons primed. We're not taking any chances. The crew moved to obey, their movements quick and efficient. Despite their fear, they trusted their captain. Elias Kane was known for his calm under pressure, his ability to make difficult decisions when it mattered most. But even he could feel the unease creeping into his thoughts. This wasn't just a mission anymore, it was a confrontation with the unknown, a test of humanity's resolve. The Horizon's Fury continued its approach, the vast expanse of the Lyris 7 system stretching out before them. The star at its center burned a pale blue, casting an eerie glow over the surrounding planets. Asteroids drifted lazily through the void, their jagged surfaces glinting like shards of broken glass. And there, in the distance, the alien ships waited. As they drew closer, the vessels came into view on the main display. They were unlike anything the crew had ever seen, sleek and angular, their surfaces shimmering with an otherworldly light. They seemed to pulse with energy, as if alive, their forms both beautiful and menacing. There was no doubt in anyone's mind, these were not the creations of any human hand. Vega's voice broke the silence again, softer this time, almost a whisper. "Captain, they are just sitting there. No movement, no signals. It's like they are waiting for us." Elias felt a knot tighten in his chest. Waiting. The word carried a sense of foreboding, as if the ships were predators watching their prey, calculating their next move. He stepped closer to the display, his eyes fixed on the alien vessels. "Any signs of the celestial dawn?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Vega shook her head. "No debris, no energy signatures. It's like it was erased." The silence on the bridge deepened, the weight of her words settling over the crew like a shroud. Erased. The thought was terrifying. The celestial dawn hadn't just been destroyed, it had been wiped from existence, leaving no trace behind. What kind of power could do something like that? Elias straightened, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Open a channel to the alien ships. Let's see if they are willing to talk." The communications officer, a young man named Lieutenant Adrian Cole, hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Channel open, sir." Elias took a deep breath, steadying himself. "This is Captain Elias Kane of the United Earth ship Horizon's Fury. We are on a peaceful mission of exploration and wish to establish contact. Please respond." The message was met with silence. Seconds stretched into minutes, the tension on the bridge growing with each passing moment. Then, without warning, the alien ships began to move. They shifted with an unnatural grace, their forms gliding through the void like shadows. The largest of them, a massive vessel that dwarfed the Horizon's Fury, turned to face them directly. Its surface shimmered, and for a moment, Elias thought he saw symbols etched into its hull, ancient, unknowable markings that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. "Captain," Vega said, her voice tight with urgency. "They are locking onto us. Energy readings are spiking. I think they are preparing to fire." Elias felt his heart race, but his voice remained calm. "Raise shields. Prepare for evasive maneuvers." The crew sprang into action, their movements precise despite the fear etched into their faces. The bridge was alive with the hum of machinery and the beeping of consoles, but beneath it all was the unspoken understanding that this could be their last moment. As the alien ships loomed closer, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that they were being judged, weighed in the balance by beings far beyond their understanding. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain: humanity's first contact with alien life had begun not with words, but with blood. And the Horizon's Fury would have to fight to survive. The air on the bridge of the Horizon's Fury grew colder, as if the void of space itself had seeped into the ship. The tension was suffocating, every crew member frozen in place, their eyes fixed on the screen before them. And then, they appeared. The beings who called themselves the Erythians emerged from the darkness, their forms shimmering like liquid metal forged in the heart of a dying star. They were tall, impossibly tall, their bodies glowing faintly with hues of gold and silver that seemed to ripple and shift with every subtle movement. Their faces were smooth and featureless, save for their eyes, two orbs of blinding white light that pierced through the screen, filling the room with an oppressive sense of power. They did not look like creatures of flesh and blood. They looked like gods. A deep, resonant voice echoed through the bridge, though their mouths did not move. It was as if the sound came from everywhere and nowhere at once, filling the minds of the crew with its weight. "We are the Erythians," the voice proclaimed, each word laced with an unshakable authority, as if it were not a statement but a decree. "Rulers of the galaxy. Guardians of its order. For over 3,000 years, we have watched, We have judged, and we have ruled. Captain Elias Kane stood firm, his fists clenched at his sides. The weight of their presence was almost unbearable, like standing in the shadow of a towering mountain that threatened to collapse at any moment. But he refused to look away. "If you're the rulers of the galaxy," he said, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him, "then explain why one of your ships destroyed the Celestial Dawn. Explain why you murdered innocent people." There was a pause, a silence so profound it seemed to pull the air from the room. Then, another figure stepped forward, larger and more imposing than the rest. This one's glow was brighter, its metallic body adorned with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and writhe like living things. Its eyes burned hotter, more intense, as it fixed its gaze on Kane. This was their leader, the High Sovereign Caliph. Calith's voice was colder, sharper, like the edge of a blade. "Insects," he said, the word dripping with disdain. "That is what you are. Primitive creatures, crawling out of the mud, daring to reach for the stars. You do not understand the forces at play in this galaxy. You do not belong here." Kane felt a surge of anger rise within him, but he held it back, his expression unreadable. "You didn't answer my question," he said, his tone unwavering. "Why did you attack our ship?" Caliph tilted his head slightly, as if amused by the question. "Because it was in our way," he said simply, as though the lives of the crew meant nothing. "Your kind does not ask permission. You wander where you do not belong, defiling sacred paths with your ignorance. The Celestial Dawn was a warning, Captain Kane. A lesson." Before Kane could respond, the screen flickered, and an image replaced Calith's glowing form. It was footage of the Celestial Dawn, captured from the perspective of one of the Erythian ships. The exploration vessel floated peacefully in the void, its lights blinking softly against the darkness. Then, without warning, a beam of golden energy lanced out from the alien ship, striking the Celestial Dawn with devastating force. The human vessel crumpled like paper, its hull splitting apart as explosions rippled through its body. The crew of the Horizon's Fury watched in horror as the destruction unfolded. Escape pods launched from the Celestial Dawn, tiny glimmers of hope darting away from the inferno. But the Erythians showed no mercy. Another beam of energy swept across the void, obliterating the pods one by one. There were no survivors. The footage ended, and Calith's face returned to the screen. His glowing eyes seemed to bore into Kane's very soul. "Do you understand now, Captain?" he said, his tone almost mocking. "This galaxy is ours. It has always been ours. You are nothing more than dust, scattered by the winds of our will." Kane's hands trembled at his sides, his nails digging into his palms. He wanted to scream, to lash out, to tear through the screen and strike the being that spoke with such cruelty. But he forced himself to remain calm. "You call yourselves rulers," he said, his voice low and steady. "But rulers protect. They guide. They don't slaughter the innocent." Caliph laughed, a sound that was both beautiful and terrible, like the chime of 1,000 bells ringing in unison. "You speak of innocence as though it matters," he said. "There is no innocence, only power. And we hold it all." The High Sovereign straightened, his form glowing brighter, more blinding. "You have one solar cycle to submit," he declared. "Surrender your world, your people, your future. Kneel before the Erythian Dominion, and we may allow you to live. Refuse, and you will share the fate of the Celestial Dawn." With that, the screen went dark, leaving the bridge in silence. The crew stood frozen, their faces pale, their breaths shallow. The weight of Calith's words hung over them like a shroud, suffocating and inescapable. Kane turned to face his crew, his expression hard but resolute. "We know what we're up against now," he said, his voice cutting through the silence like a knife. "They want us to kneel. They want us to give up everything we've fought for, everything we've built. But we won't. Not now. Not ever." The crew nodded, their fear giving way to determination. They had seen the face of the enemy, and it was terrifying. But they would not bow. They would fight, no matter the cost. For their people. For their future. For humanity. The bridge of the horizon's fury was suffused with a grim determination, the air thick with the weight of the decision Captain Kane had made. He stood tall at the center, his voice steady and unwavering. "We will not bow," he declared, his words cutting through the silence like a blade. "They may call themselves gods, but gods can bleed. And we will make them bleed." The crew exchanged uncertain glances, fear flickering in their eyes like dying embers. The Erythians were unlike anything humanity had ever faced, immense, powerful, and ancient beyond comprehension. But Kane's resolve was infectious, his defiance igniting a spark of courage in their hearts. They would fight, not because they believed they could win, but because surrender was unthinkable. Commander Elena Vega, the ship's tactical officer, broke the tension with a sudden realization. Her sharp mind had been racing since the Erythians revealed themselves, analyzing every detail, every fragment of information. "Captain," she said, her voice urgent but controlled, "I think I've found something." Kane turned to her, hope flickering in his eyes. "What is it?" Vega's fingers flew across her console, pulling up schematics and energy readings from their scans of the Erythian ships. "Their shields," she explained, her tone quick and precise. "They operate on a harmonic frequency, a design that hasn't been updated for thousands of years. It's ancient, primitive by their standards. If we can disrupt that frequency, we might be able to penetrate their defenses." The crew leaned in, the weight of her words sinking in. For the first time, a glimmer of possibility shone through the darkness. Kane nodded, his mind already working through the implications. "Can we do it?" Vega hesitated for a moment, her brow furrowed as she calculated the risks. "It won't be easy," she admitted. "We'll need to adjust our weapon systems to match the frequency. And even if it works, we'll only have a narrow window to strike before they adapt." Kane's jaw tightened, his resolve hardening. "Then we'll make it count." The horizon's fury surged forward, its engines roaring as it closed the distance to the Erythian fleet. The alien ships loomed ahead, their shimmering forms glowing with an ethereal light that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. They were beautiful in their design, but that beauty masked a terrible power, a power that had crushed humanity's hopes once before. But this time would be different. The first volley came swiftly. Golden beams of energy lanced out from the Erythian ships, slicing through the void with devastating precision. The horizon's fury weaved through the onslaught, its shields flaring as they absorbed the brunt of the attack. The crew worked in perfect synchronization, their movements sharp and deliberate, their fear replaced by adrenaline and focus. "Target their warship," Kane ordered, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Adjust weapon frequencies to match their shield harmonic." "Vega, are we ready?" Vega's fingers flew across her console, her eyes fixed on the data streaming across her screen. "Almost there," she said, her voice tight with concentration. "Just a few more adjustments." The ship shook violently as another beam struck its shields, the impact reverberating through the hull. Sparks flew from damaged consoles, and alarms blared, but the crew held their ground. Kane's gaze never wavered, his focus unshakable. "Hold steady," he commanded. "We're not done yet." Finally, Vega looked up, her face pale but determined. "We're ready," Captain? Kane nodded, his voice steady. Fire. The Horizon's fury unleashed its weapons, beams of concentrated energy streaking toward the nearest Erythian warship. At first, it seemed futile. The alien ship's shields flared, absorbing the attack as they always had. But then, something changed. The shields flickered, their glow dimming as Vega's adjustments took effect. The harmonic frequency disrupted, the Erythian defenses faltered. The crew watched in stunned silence as the human weapons tore through the alien ship's hull, explosions ripping across its surface. The warship, once so imposing, crumbled under the assault, its shimmering form breaking apart in a cascade of golden light. For the first time in 3,000 years, an Erythian vessel had fallen. Cheers erupted across the bridge, the crew's voices rising in a chorus of triumph. Kane allowed himself a brief smile, the weight on his shoulders lifting, if only for a moment. "Good work, everyone," he said, his voice carrying a note of pride. "But this isn't over. Stay sharp." On the Erythian command ship, High Sovereign Caliph watched the destruction unfold, his glowing eyes narrowing. For the first time, the so-called god felt something unfamiliar, a flicker of doubt, a crack in his unshakable confidence. These humans, these insects, had done the unthinkable. They had struck down one of his ships, defied his dominion, challenged his power. Caliph's voice echoed through his ship, cold and furious. "Impossible," he hissed, his tone laced with anger and disbelief. "They are nothing. They are dust. How could they?" He trailed off, his gaze fixed on the screen, where the Horizon's fury continued to fight, its crew undeterred by the odds stacked against them. For the first time in millennia, Caliph felt the weight of vulnerability. The gods of the galaxy were not invincible after all. Back on the Horizon's fury, Kane stood tall, his gaze fixed on the alien fleet. He knew the battle was far from over, but for the first time, hope burned bright in his chest. Humanity had struck a blow against the so-called gods, proved that they could fight, that they could stand. And they would keep fighting, until the galaxy was theirs or until they had nothing left to give. The aftermath of the battle left the Horizon's fury adrift in a fragile stillness. The ship bore the scars of its defiance, charred hull plating, flickering lights, and the faint hum of damaged systems struggling to keep the vessel alive. Yet, amidst the wreckage, there was a fragile sense of hope, like the first light of dawn breaking through an endless night. In the dimly lit conference chamber, Ambassador Dorian Hale stood, his tall frame casting a long shadow against the walls. His face, lined with the wear of countless negotiations and years of diplomacy, was calm yet urgent. "Captain Kane," he began, his voice steady but imploring, "we've made our point. We've shown them we're not helpless. But now is the time to talk. To find a way to end this without more bloodshed." Kane, seated at the head of the table, leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly together. His face was a mask of resolve, but his eyes betrayed the weight of the decisions he carried. "Talk," he said, his voice low and edged with steel. "You saw what they did to the Celestial Dawn. To the escape pods. To innocent lives. These aren't beings who listen to reason, Ambassador. They only understand one thing, strength." Hale's gaze didn't waver. "And yet, strength without wisdom is nothing but destruction. If we push them too far, they'll retaliate with everything they have. You've seen their power. Do you really think we can survive an all-out war with them?" Before Kane could respond, the door hissed open, and Chief Engineer Marcus Holt entered, his face smudged with grease and his eyes alight with a manic energy. He carried a data pad clutched tightly in one hand, his other gesturing animatedly as he spoke. "Captain, I've got it," he said, his voice cutting through the tension in the room. a way to turn their own tech against them. Kane turned to him, his brow furrowing. Explain. Holt placed a data pad on the table, its screen lighting up with schematics and energy readings. Their shield technology, he began, his words tumbling out in a rush. It's ancient, sure, but it's also incredibly advanced. They've been using the same harmonic frequencies for millennia, which means they've never had to consider anyone using it against them. If we can replicate their shield emitters and reconfigure them, we could create a feedback loop, essentially turning their own defenses into a weapon. Hale frowned, his expression skeptical. And what would that accomplish, engineer? More destruction? More death? Holt shot him a sharp look. It would give us leverage, he said firmly. The kind of leverage that makes even gods think twice. Kane leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. He could feel the weight of the room pressing down on him, the conflicting voices, the unspoken fears, the fragile hope that clung to every word. Finally, he stood, his movements deliberate, and turned to face the viewport that overlooked the vast expanse of space. The stars glittered like shards of broken glass, cold and distant. He spoke without turning, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of command. We've faced extinction before, he began, his words measured, each one striking like a hammer on an anvil. We've fought wars we shouldn't have survived. We've been outnumbered, outgunned, and outmatched. And every time, we've endured. He turned then, his gaze sweeping across the room, meeting each pair of eyes in turn. We don't kneel, he continued, his voice rising with conviction. Not to kings. Not to tyrants. And certainly not to false gods. If the Erythians think they can crush us, they are wrong. We've bled before, and we'll bleed again if we have to. But we'll never stop fighting. Not until we've secured a future for humanity. The room fell silent, the weight of his words settling over them like a mantle. Hale's expression softened, though the worry in his eyes remained. Holt nodded, his determination redoubled. They all knew the risks, the odds stacked against them, but Kane's words had lit a fire in their hearts, a fire that refused to be extinguished. Meanwhile, far away, aboard the Erythian command ship, High Sovereign Calith stood in his private chamber, his glowing eyes fixed on the holographic display before him. The image of the destroyed warship replayed over and over, each explosion a stain on his pride. His metallic hands clenched into fists, the golden light of his form flickering with barely contained fury. Reinforcements, he commanded, his voice echoing through the chamber like thunder. Summon the full might of the Dominion. These insects will earn the price of defiance. The Erythian fleet began to mobilize, their ships moving with an eerie grace, their golden light illuminating the void. Calith's anger burned like a star, but beneath it, a shadow of doubt lingered. The humans had done the unthinkable. They had struck down one of his ships. They had defied the gods. Back on the horizon's fury, the crew prepared for what lay ahead. Engineers worked tirelessly to implement Holt's plan, their hands moving with a desperate precision. Vega pored over tactical readouts, her sharp mind analyzing every possible scenario. And Kane stood at the center of it all, his presence a steady anchor in the storm. The fragile hope that had been born in the aftermath of the battle began to take root, growing stronger with each passing moment. They knew the road ahead would be perilous, that the Erythians would come at them with everything they had. But they also knew this, humanity would not go quietly into the night. They would fight. They would endure. And, perhaps, they would prevail. The void of space erupted into chaos as the horizon's fury unleashed its gambit. The feedback loop, meticulously engineered by Marcus Holt, rippled through the Erythian fleet like an invisible wave. Their golden shields, once impenetrable and majestic, began to shimmer and distort, their light flickering like dying embers. For the first time in millennia, the gods of the stars were vulnerable. On the bridge of the horizon's fury, tension coiled around every soul like a vice. Kane stood at the center, his presence as steady as a mountain amidst the storm. His sharp eyes scanned the battlefield through the massive viewport, where the Erythian warships, once symbols of invincibility, now faltered. Their shields sputtered, collapsing in bursts of fractured light, leaving their sleek, golden hulls exposed to the relentless human assault. Direct hit on the lead ship. Vega's voice rang out, tight with focus but tinged with exhilaration. Her hands moved swiftly over her console, directing the ship's weapons with precision. Their shields are down, Captain. They are exposed. Kane's jaw tightened, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. Don't let up. Target their engines and weapon systems. If we can cripple them, they'll be forced to retreat. The crew moved as one, their fear replaced by a fiery determination. The ship's weapons roared to life, streaks of energy tearing through the void and slamming into the vulnerable Erythian vessels. Explosions rippled across their hulls, golden fragments scattering like shards of broken glass. The once mighty warships, symbols of divine power, now burned like fallen stars. But the Erythians were not idle. Their retaliation came swiftly, beams of golden energy lancing toward the horizon's fury. The ship rocked violently as the blast struck its shields, the deck trembling beneath the crew's feet. Sparks flew from damaged consoles, and the acrid smell of burning circuits filled the air. Shields at 30%, shouted one of the officers, his voice strained. Kane's grip on the railing tightened, his knuckles white. Hold the line, he commanded, his voice calm but unyielding. We've come too far to fall now. At that moment, a transmission crackled through the comms, the voice of Earth's high command breaking through the static. Horizon's fury, this is Earth. Reinforcements are en route, but they are hours away. You'll need to hold the line until we arrive. The words hung in the air like a weight, the enormity of the task sinking into the crew. Hours. Against an enemy that had ruled the stars for millennia, hours felt like an eternity. But there was no hesitation, no faltering. They had chosen this fight, and they would see it through. Kane turned to his crew, his voice steady and resolute. You heard them. We're on our own for now. But we've already done the impossible. We've shown them that gods can bleed. And now, we'll show them that humanity doesn't break. The crew responded with a unified roar, their fear replaced by a fierce determination. They knew the odds, but they also knew what was at stake. Behind them lay Earth, their home, their families, their future. They would fight not just for survival, but for the right to exist, to stand as equals in a galaxy that had long dismissed them as insignificant. The battle raged on, the horizon's fury dancing through the chaos with a desperate grace. Hold's feedback loop continued to destabilize the Erythian shields, and one by one, their ships began to fall. Each explosion was a crack in the facade of their divinity, a reminder that even gods could be brought low. But the cost was steep. The horizon's fury bore the brunt of the Erythian retaliation, its hull scarred and battered, its systems pushed to their limits. The crew worked tirelessly, their hands moving with a frantic precision as they fought to keep the ship alive. Every second felt like an eternity, every decision a matter of life and death. Amidst the chaos, Kane never wavered. He moved through the bridge like a force of nature, his presence a steady anchor in the storm. He barked orders, reassured his crew, and kept his focus on the battle, his mind racing with strategies and contingencies. He knew they couldn't hold out forever, but he also knew they didn't have to. They just had to hold long enough. On the Erythian command ship, High Sovereign Caliph watched the battle with a growing sense of unease. His glowing eyes narrowed as he observed the humans' defiance, their refusal to yield. His fleet, once invincible, was faltering. The humans had found a way to pierce their shields, to strike at the heart of their power. It was unthinkable, and yet it was happening. "They fight like cornered beasts," Caliph muttered, his voice a low growl. "Desperate, reckless. But there is strength in their desperation." His advisors stood silent, their golden forms dimmed with uncertainty. The Erythians had never faced an enemy like this, one that refused to bow, refused to break. The humans were not gods, but they fought with a ferocity that made even the divine hesitate. Back on the Horizon's Fury, the crew fought with everything they had. Vega's tactical brilliance kept them one step ahead of the Erythian attacks, while Holt's ingenuity ensured their weapons continued to exploit the enemy's weaknesses. The ship shuddered with every impact, but it held, a testament to the resilience of its crew. As the hours dragged on, the tide of the battle began to shift. The Erythians, shaken and disoriented, began to falter. Their movements grew less coordinated, their attacks less precise. The cracks in their facade of divinity widened, and for the first time, the humans saw the truth: the gods were afraid. Cain stood at the center of it all, his gaze fixed on the battlefield. He could feel the weight of the moment, the fragile hope that had carried them this far. They were on the edge of something monumental, a turning point that would echo through history. But they weren't there yet. They still had to hold. "Keep firing," he ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "We're not done until they're running." And so they fought, with fire in their hearts and the weight of humanity's future on their shoulders. The turning tide was not a victory, not yet. But it was a beginning. A crack in the armor of the gods. A reminder that even in the darkest of nights, hope could still burn bright. The battlefield, once a cacophony of fire and chaos, fell into an eerie, unnatural silence. The stars themselves seemed to dim as a presence unlike any other made itself known. From the depths of hyperspace, a shadow emerged, a vessel so vast, so incomprehensibly ancient, that it seemed to swallow the very light of the universe around it. Its surface shimmered like liquid obsidian, shifting and rippling as if alive, etched with glowing patterns that pulsed faintly like the heartbeat of a sleeping giant. The Horizon's Fury trembled as the colossal ship fully materialized, its sheer size dwarfing both the human and Erythian fleets. It was not just a ship, it was a monument to something far beyond mortal understanding. The air on the bridge grew thick, heavy with an unspoken weight, as if the presence of this ancient vessel bent reality itself. Cain, for the first time in the entire battle, felt his breath catch in his throat. "What is that?" Vega whispered, her voice barely audible, trembling with awe and fear. The answer came not from the humans, but from the Erythians. Across the battlefield, their once proud fleet faltered. The golden light of their ships dimmed, their formations broke, and their movements became erratic. Even the mighty Erythian command ship seemed to hesitate, its engines flickering as if in submission. The voices of the Erythian commanders, usually so commanding and imperious, now echoed across intercepted channels in panicked, frantic tones. "It cannot be," one voice stammered, trembling with disbelief. "The Eternals, they have returned." On the bridge of the Erythian flagship, High Sovereign Caliph stood frozen, his glowing form dimming as fear gripped him. The Eternals, beings he had only heard of in whispered legends, creators of the very technology that had elevated his kind to gods, were real. And they had come. His hands clenched the edges of his throne, metallic fingers digging into the armrests as his pride crumbled beneath the weight of their arrival. The colossal ship emitted no sound, no visible weapons, yet its mere presence spoke of power beyond comprehension. Then, Without warning, a wave of energy swept across the battlefield, not destructive but profound. It was not felt by the body, but by the mind, a pulse of thought, of awareness, that touched every living soul. Kane staggered, gripping the railing for support as a voice, or perhaps 1,000 voices, filled his mind. "We are the Eternals." The words were not spoken but felt, resonating deep within, bypassing language and striking directly at the core of understanding. They carried no malice, no anger, but an overwhelming sense of authority, as if the very fabric of existence bent to their will. The Erythians, once so proud and untouchable, now cowered. Their ships drifted aimlessly, their crews paralyzed by the weight of the Eternals' presence. And then came the revelation, a truth that shattered the foundations of their divinity. "Erythians," the voice continued, cold and unyielding, "you are not gods. You never were. You are but a primitive species who stumbled upon the remnants of our creations, abandoned long ago. The power you wield is not your own. It is borrowed, misunderstood, and misused." The words struck like thunder, reverberating across the battlefield. On the horizon's fury, the crew listened in stunned silence, their eyes wide as the truth unraveled before them. Kane's hands tightened on the railing, his mind racing to process what he was hearing. The Erythians, these so-called gods, were nothing more than opportunists, their entire empire built on stolen knowledge. The Erythian fleet seemed to shrink, their golden light fading as their aura of divinity crumbled under the weight of the Eternal's judgment. Kalitha's voice broke through the silence, desperate and pleading. "Great Eternals," he called out, his tone stripped of all its usual arrogance, "we have honored your legacy, carried forth your will." Silence. The single word cut through his plea like a blade, sharp and final. "You have dishonored our legacy with your arrogance and oppression. You have claimed divinity while spreading suffering. You are unworthy of the power you wield." The Eternals' attention then turned to the humans, their presence shifting like a vast tide. Kane felt the weight of their gaze, not with his eyes but with his soul. It was as if they could see every thought, every decision, every hope, and fear he had ever carried. The sensation was overwhelming, but not cruel. There was something in it, something almost curious. "Humans," the voice said, softer now, though no less powerful. "You are fragile, fleeting, yet you have forged your own path. You have faced extinction and refused to yield. You have defied those who claim to be gods, not with stolen power, but with your own resilience. This is commendable." A faint glow appeared at the heart of the colossal ship, and from it, a small, crystalline object emerged, floating through the void toward the horizon's fury. It shimmered with an inner light, shifting through colors that seemed to defy description. As it approached, Vega's console lit up, and she gasped. "Captain, it's transmitting something. Data. A lot of it." The crystal came to rest just outside the ship, hovering in the vacuum of space like a gift from the stars. The Eternal's voice echoed one final time, their tone carrying a warning that felt as ancient as the universe itself. "Within this crystal lies the truth of the Erythians. Their rise, their lies, and their fall. Use it wisely. But know this, the galaxy is watching. Others will come, drawn by your defiance, your strength. Some will seek to ally with you. Others will seek to destroy you. Be vigilant. Be wise. For strength without wisdom is the path to ruin." And then, as silently as they had arrived, the Eternals began to depart. Their ship shimmered, the glowing patterns on its surface pulsing one final time before it faded into the void. The weight of their presence lifted, leaving the battlefield in a stunned, fragile silence. The Erythian fleet, broken and humiliated, began to retreat, their golden ships limping away into the darkness. On the horizon's fury, the crews stood in awe, their minds reeling from what they had just witnessed. Kane turned to face his crew, his expression unreadable, but his voice steady. "The galaxy is watching," he repeated softly, the words of the Eternals hanging heavy in the air. "And so are we?" The crystal, now pulsing with an otherworldly glow, was brought to the center of the horizon's fury. Its light seemed alive, shifting and swirling, casting strange, dancing shadows on the walls. When activated, it unleashed a wave of information, images, voices, and memories that didn't just display on screens but seemed to pour directly into the minds of those present. The truth of the Erythians, buried for millennia, was no longer hidden. Across the galaxy, the revelation spread like a firestorm. The crystal's message, amplified through human and allied networks, reached even the most distant corners of the Dominion. The Erythians' divine facade shattered as the truth was laid bare. They were no gods, only a species that had stumbled upon the relics of the Eternals and used them to build an empire of lies. The images of the rise of their primitive beginnings, their discovery of the ancient technology, and their calculated oppression of other species were undeniable. On countless worlds, the oppressed watched in stunned silence as the truth unfolded before their eyes. The chains of fear and reverence that had bound them for generations began to crack. The Erythians' golden ships, once symbols of divine power, now seemed hollow, their light a mockery of the truth. Anger replaced fear, and whispers of rebellion grew louder. On the slave world of Varnus, where the skies were perpetually darkened by the smoke of Erythian factories, the first uprising began. The workers, beaten, starved, and stripped of hope for so long, rose with makeshift weapons and fury in their hearts. They tore down the golden statues of their so-called gods, their cries of defiance echoing across the barren wastelands. Humanity, now seen as the spark that ignited this galactic rebellion, became a symbol of hope. The horizon's fury and its fleet moved from system to system, not as conquerors but as liberators. They shared the truth, broadcasted the crystal's revelations, and armed the oppressed with both weapons and courage. The Erythian Dominion, once a monolithic empire, began to fracture. Planets that had been loyal out of fear turned against their masters. Erythian garrisons were overwhelmed by uprisings, their golden banners torn down and burned. Even among the Erythians themselves, doubts began to fester. The cracks in their empire widened with every rebellion, every act of defiance. But the cost was high. The Erythians, desperate to maintain their crumbling rule, struck back with ferocity. Entire cities were razed, their populations slaughtered as warnings to others. The galaxy was plunged into chaos, and the line between liberation and destruction blurred. Kane stood on the bridge of the horizon's fury, watching reports of the uprisings flood in. His face was grim, his voice steady as he addressed his crew. "We've given them the truth," he said, "but truth alone isn't enough. We have to stand with them, fight with them, or this will all fall apart." And so humanity, once isolated and insignificant, became the backbone of a galactic revolution. The human fleet, now bolstered by ships from liberated species, moved like a storm across the galaxy. Each ship was a patchwork of cultures and technologies, a testament to the unity forged in the fires of rebellion. Together, they targeted the heart of the Erythian Dominion, striking at key strongholds and cutting off supply lines. One of the most pivotal battles took place on the planet Etherian, a world shrouded in perpetual twilight. Its surface was dominated by towering black spires, each one a processing facility where countless lives had been enslaved and broken. The air was thick with the scent of ash and despair, the cries of the oppressed echoing across the barren plains. Major Caleb Ward, a grizzled veteran with scars that told stories of 100 battles, led the ground forces. His voice, rough but commanding, rallied the troops as they prepared to storm the largest facility. "This isn't just a battle," he told them. This is a message. To the Erythians, to the galaxy, to everyone who's ever thought they could crush the spirit of the free. Today, we show them what unity looks like. The assault was brutal. The Erythians, desperate and cornered, fought with a ferocity born of fear. Their golden weapons burned through the air, cutting down soldiers without mercy. But the sight of humans and aliens fighting side by side, their differences forgotten in the face of a shared enemy, inspired a strength that no weapon could match. Ward led the charge through the facility's gates, his squad cutting down Erythian guards with precision. Behind him, a towering alien warrior from the liberated world of Zyner smashed through the walls with raw strength, clearing a path for the others. The enslaved, seeing their chance for freedom, joined the fight, their chains turned into weapons. Inside the facility, the horrors of the Erythian regime were laid bare. Rows upon rows of cells, each one filled with hollow-eyed prisoners, stretched into the distance. Machines hummed with cold efficiency, stripping the enslaved of their individuality, their hope. Ward's heart burned with fury as he saw the extent of the cruelty, and his resolve hardened. "Free them all," he ordered, his voice echoing through the comms. "Every last one." Meanwhile, aboard the Horizon's Fury, Dr. Illyra Quinn worked tirelessly in the ship's lab. The crystal's revelations had not only exposed the Erythians' lies but also unlocked secrets of their stolen technology. Illyra, with her sharp mind and unyielding determination, was turning the tools of oppression into instruments of liberation. Her lab was a chaotic symphony of glowing screens and humming machinery. She barely paused to eat or sleep, her focus entirely on the task at hand. "If we can reconfigure this," she muttered to herself, "we can disable their weapons remotely. Turn their strength against them." Her breakthroughs became the backbone of the rebellion. Erythian weapons, once symbols of fear, were repurposed to protect the liberated. Ships that had once enforced tyranny now carried supplies to the starving and the wounded. On Etherian, the tide finally turned. Ward and his forces reached the facility's control center, where the Erythian overseer made a last stand. The fight was vicious, but in the end, the overseer fell, his golden armor tarnished and broken. The facility's systems were shut down, and the enslaved were freed. As the sun began to rise over Etherian's dark horizon, its light pierced through the smoke and ruin, casting a golden glow over the battlefield. Soldiers and freed prisoners stood together, their faces streaked with dirt and tears, their eyes filled with hope. Ward looked out over the scene, his chest heaving with exhaustion but his heart swelling with pride. "This is what freedom looks like," he said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. Back on the Horizon's Fury, Illyra watched the reports come in, a faint smile on her tired face. The galaxy was changing, piece by piece, battle by battle. And humanity, once small and insignificant, was at the center of it all. But even in victory, the words of the Eternals lingered in their minds: "The galaxy is watching. Use your strength wisely." The war was far from over, and the challenges ahead would test them in ways they could not yet imagine. But for now, they had hope. And that was enough. The chamber was vast, its walls carved from dark stone that seemed to absorb the light. High above, a dome of glass revealed the endless expanse of stars, a silent witness to the trial unfolding below. In the center of the room stood High Sovereign Caliph, his once radiant golden armor tarnished and dull, his regal posture diminished but not broken. Chains of shimmering energy bound his wrists, glowing faintly as if they were alive, a reminder that even now, his power was meaningless. Around him, the Council of Liberated Species sat in a half-circle, their faces a mosaic of anger, sorrow, and grim determination. Each member represented a world once crushed beneath the weight of the Erythian dominion. Some bore scars from the years of oppression, missing limbs, burns, or hollow eyes that spoke of unspeakable loss. Yet they sat tall, their voices steady, as they prepared to pass judgment on the one who had called himself a god. The air was heavy with tension, thick enough to choke. Caliph stood in silence, his glowing eyes scanning the room, his expression unreadable. He was no longer the towering figure of fear and authority he had once been. Stripped of his fleets, his armies, and his empire, he was now just a man facing the wrath of those he had wronged. The first testimony came from a Xynarian elder, her voice trembling with age but sharp with pain. "You burned our forests," she said, her words cutting through the chamber like a blade. "You turned our rivers to poison and called it purification. My people sang songs to the stars, songs that had been passed down for generations. You silenced them. You erased us." Her words hung in the air, each syllable a weight pressing down on Caliph. But he did not flinch. His expression remained cold, his chin lifted as if he still believed himself above reproach. One by one, others came forward. A young man from Varnas spoke of the factories, of the endless days of labor under the watchful eyes of Erythian overseers. A mother from Etherian described the night her family was taken, her voice breaking as she recounted the screams of her children. A warrior from the desert world of Kairos removed his helmet to show the scars that crisscrossed his face, remnants of the torture he endured for daring to resist. The stories were endless, each one a thread in a tapestry of pain and suffering. The council listened in silence, their faces grim, their hearts heavy. Yet Caliph remained unmoved. When his turn to speak came, he raised his head, his voice echoing through the chamber with the same arrogance that had once commanded fleets. "You call this justice?" he sneered. "You are nothing but insects, clawing at the feet of giants. I am divine. I am eternal. You cannot judge me." A murmur rippled through the chamber, a mix of anger and disbelief. But the council remained calm. The Xynarian elder leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as she spoke. "Divine," she repeated, her voice low and sharp. "You are no god, Caliph. You are a coward who hid behind stolen power, a tyrant who built his empire on the backs of the innocent. And now, you will face what you have long denied, the truth." The council's decision was unanimous. Caliph would not be executed, nor would he be imprisoned. Instead, he would live among the very people he had enslaved. He would walk their streets, see their ruins, hear their stories. He would be forced to confront the consequences of his actions every day for the rest of his life. As the guards led him away, Caliph's defiance faltered for the first time. His glowing eyes flickered, his steps hesitant. For the first time, he seemed to feel the weight of his crimes. And as the chamber doors closed behind him, the council sat in silence, their work far from over but their resolve unshaken. The war was over, but the scars it left behind were deep. Across the galaxy, the ruins of the Erythian dominion stood as grim reminders of the cost of freedom. Cities lay in ashes, families were scattered, and entire cultures struggled to reclaim what had been lost. The galaxy had been liberated, but the path to peace was fraught with challenges. On the planet Viera, a world of rolling green hills and crystal-clear lakes, tensions simmered like a storm waiting to break. The once beautiful cities of the planet had been shattered during the rebellion, their golden spires reduced to rubble. Now, Erythian civilians, those who had never held power but had benefited from the Dominion's rule, found themselves at the mercy of the very people they had once looked down upon. Captain Kane stood in the middle of a ruined plaza, his boots crunching against broken stone. Around him, two groups faced off, their voices rising in anger. On one side were the former slaves, their faces hard with years of suffering, their hands clutching makeshift weapons. On the other were the Erythian civilians, their once pristine robes torn and dirty, their expressions a mix of fear and defiance. "They took everything from us," shouted a rebel leader, his voice raw with emotion. "Our homes, our families, our freedom. And now you want us to show them mercy." A young Erythian woman stepped forward, her eyes blazing with anger. "We didn't enslave you," she cried. "We're not soldiers or overseers. We're just trying to survive, the same as you." The tension in the air was palpable, a spark away from violence. Kane raised his hand, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "Enough," he commanded. The plaza fell silent, all eyes turning to him. Kane's face was lined with exhaustion, but his gaze was steady, his voice firm. "Justice isn't about revenge," he said, his words slow and deliberate. "It's about building something better. If we let hatred guide us now, we'll destroy everything we've fought for." He turned to the rebels, his tone softening. "I know your pain. I've seen what they did to you. But these people aren't your enemy anymore. They're just as lost as you are." Then he faced the Erythians, his expression hardening. "And you," he said, his voice cold. "You don't get to hide behind ignorance. You lived in luxury while others suffered. You may not have held the whip, but you turned a blind eye to those who did. If you want peace, you need to earn it." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, slowly, the rebel leader lowered his weapon. The Erythian woman stepped back, her shoulders slumping. The tension began to ease, replaced by an uneasy truce. In the days that followed, Kane worked tirelessly to mediate between the two sides. It was slow, painful work, filled with setbacks and mistrust. But bit by bit, walls began to crumble, not the physical walls of the ruined cities, but the invisible ones that divided them. Meanwhile, on other worlds, similar struggles played out. Dr. Illyria Quinn led efforts to rebuild, using salvaged Erythian technology to restore power grids, purify water, and heal the wounded. Her work was a beacon of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest times, progress was possible. The galaxy was far from healed. There were still those who sought vengeance, those who clung to old hatreds. But there were also moments of hope: an Erythian child sharing food with a Xynarian elder, a rebel soldier helping an Erythian farmer rebuild his home, a council of former enemies sitting together to plan their future. Kane stood on a hill overlooking the city, the setting sun casting a golden glow over the ruins. He knew the road ahead would be long and difficult. But as he watched humans and aliens working side by side, he felt a spark of hope. The galaxy was watching, as the Eternals had warned. And for the first time in a long time, it saw not just conflict, but the possibility of something greater. The chamber of the Galactic Concord was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It was a vast, circular hall suspended in the void of space, its walls made of a translucent material that shimmered with the light of distant stars. The ceiling arched high above, a dome of pure crystal that refracted the light into a cascade of colors, as if the very cosmos were blessing this moment. Seated around a massive circular table were representatives from dozens of species, their forms as diverse as the worlds they came from. The insectoid Xynarians clicked their mandibles softly in conversation, their iridescent shells glinting in the starlight. The towering, reptilian Chirocians sat in silence, their golden eyes watching every movement with a predator's patience. Beside them, the delicate, translucent forms of the Etherian delegates shimmered faintly, their voices like whispers on the wind. And among them all, humanity stood, their faces marked by determination and hope. This was the Galactic Concord, the first true alliance of its kind. No longer would the galaxy be ruled by fear and oppression. This was a union built on equality, each species given a voice, each culture respected. The air was thick with anticipation as the assembled delegates prepared to sign the Concord's founding charter, a document that would bind their fates together. Kane stood at the edge of the chamber, watching the proceedings with quiet pride. He had fought for this moment, bled for it, and now it was real. The horrors of the Erythian Dominion seemed distant now, though their scars would never fully fade. But this was proof that something better could rise from the ashes. As the last signature was etched onto the glowing tablet at the center of the table, a soft hum filled the air. The table itself began to glow, its surface shifting to display a holographic map of the galaxy. Every star, every world, was represented, a reminder of the vastness of their shared home. The room erupted into applause, a sound that echoed through the chamber like thunder. Delegates stood, some cheering, others embracing. Even the stoic Kyroshians allowed themselves a rare smile. It was a moment of triumph, a declaration that the galaxy's future would no longer be shaped by fear, but by unity. The first act of the Concorde was the launch of the Unity's Dawn, a colony ship unlike any other. Its sleek hull was a patchwork of designs, each section built by a different species. The engines bore the angular, efficient design of humanity, while the living quarters were crafted with the organic elegance of the Aetherians. The ship's bridge was a marvel of Xynarian engineering, its controls designed to be operated by any species. As the Unity's Dawn prepared for launch, crowds gathered on every world to watch. On Earth, people stood shoulder to shoulder in the streets, their faces lit by the glow of massive screens. On Xynar, the air was filled with the hum of wings as thousands of insectoid beings hovered in anticipation. And on the barren plains of Varnus, the freed slaves who had once toiled under the Erythian regime now stood together, their faces turned skyward. The launch itself was a thing of beauty. The Unity's Dawn rose slowly from its platform, its engines casting a golden light that bathed the crowd below. As it ascended into the stars, the cheers of countless voices followed it, a chorus of hope that echoed across the galaxy. For the first time in millennia, the galaxy was not ruled by fear. It was ruled by cooperation, by the shared dream of a better future. Humanity's influence continued to grow, not through conquest, but through innovation and partnership. They had become the architects of a new era, one where the wounds of the past could finally begin to heal. The galaxy was healing, but its mysteries were far from exhausted. On the fringes of known space, where the stars burned faint and cold, a discovery was made that would change everything. It was a barren world, its surface scarred by ancient craters and jagged mountains. The explorers who landed there had expected little more than rock and silence. But buried beneath the surface, they found something extraordinary, an eternal artifact, still active after countless millennia. The artifact was a monolith, towering and black, its surface etched with symbols that seemed to shift and writhe when viewed from different angles. It pulsed faintly, its light a deep, soothing blue. As the explorers approached, it began to hum, a low, resonant sound that seemed to vibrate through their very bones. Then, without warning, the artifact spoke. Its voice was not a sound, but a presence, a thought that filled the minds of everyone within range. "You have passed the test," it said, its tone calm and ancient. "The galaxy is yours. Use it wisely." The message was simple, but its implications were staggering. The Eternals, the mysterious beings who had vanished long before recorded history, had been watching. The wars, the rebellions, the alliances, all of it had been a test, a trial to determine whether the galaxy's species were worthy of their inheritance. The artifact's activation sent shockwaves through the Galactic Concorde. Delegates from every species gathered to discuss its meaning, their debates filled with both excitement and trepidation. What had the Eternals left behind? What secrets, what dangers, awaited them in the uncharted depths of the galaxy. It was Kane who proposed the next step. "We can't ignore this," he said, his voice steady. "The Eternals left us a message, but they also left us a challenge. If we want to honor what we've built here, we need to face it together." And so, a fleet was assembled. Ships from every species, each one a symbol of their unity, came together to form a single armada. The fleet was a kaleidoscope of designs and colors, a testament to the diversity of the galaxy. Some ships were sleek and elegant, others bulky and utilitarian, but all were united by a shared purpose. As the fleet prepared to depart, crowds gathered once more to watch. On every world, people stood in silence, their eyes fixed on the stars. This was not a mission of war or conquest. It was a mission of discovery, of curiosity, and hope. The fleet's flagship, named Eternal Light, was the first to activate its engines. Its hull gleamed in the starlight, a beacon of unity and determination. One by one, the other ships followed, their engines flaring to life as they ascended into the void. As the fleet disappeared into the unknown, a sense of anticipation filled the galaxy. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in generations, it was a future shaped not by fear, but by the shared dream of something greater. And somewhere, in the vast expanse of stars, the secrets of the Eternals waited to be uncovered. The galaxy had passed the test. Now, it was time to discover what lay beyond.